Good morning to you all. Today I just wanted to take you with me to my breakfast morning. I have some fresh brewed, hand brewed coffee here. I'm experimenting with brewing my coffee by hand, so old school. And also my bacon and cheddar sandwich made in my old frying pan. So yeah, that's for the food, but this is not what I wanted to talk about today. Today I wanted to tell you a little bit about cudgeling, so stick fighting in the context of the Cateran Society and also in the context of using the Highland Broadsword. First of all, what do we define as cudgeling? So in the Cateran Society, we have a program of different levels training through our curriculum. And within this curriculum, we have the so-called MacGregor Method. The MacGregor Method is, as I described it before, a method to adopt the Highland Broadsword skills, the basic understandings of the fundamentals of swordsmanship, and adopt it to any form of weapon. No matter if it's a historical weapon or a modern weapon, an improvised weapon, or a weapon from a different martial art. So in theory, it gives you the skills to pick up, for example, a Chinese jian or a Japanese katana or a simple walking stick to fight with it in context of HEMA sparring, or even if you want to adopting it to self-defense situations. One weapon to work through these four families of the MacGregor Method, one of the first weapons, the first family you train is the Cudgel family. So the Cudgel family means every weapon of a sword's length, which is similar to the Highland Broadsword in proportions. That of course starts from a historical perspective with a simple stick, a walking stick, or a cudgel. From a historical point of view, we already have the mentioning of using a walking stick in some broadsword manuals. So some broadsword manuals just say that the method which is taught within this manual is also useful for self-defense when you have nothing but walking stick or simple cudgel. Others specify a little bit more, but we have real walking stick combat manuals or self-defense manuals with a walking stick evolve within the 19th century. So, which later leads to what we know as Bartitsu, La Canvini, and all these kind of walking stick self-defense of the late 19th and early 20th century. Of course, back then, a stick or a cudgel was not only a tool for self-defense, it was also a training tool. So when we take the Highland Broadsword, and the training tool traditionally would be a single stick, sometimes also called a cudgel. So these were sticks made from ash with a hardened leather basket or a wicker basket. And even though they were training swords for probably already for the Highland clansmen, but also later in a military context and also in the civilian context of the prize fighters and also the fencing schools, we also have some evidence for the single stick being used as an emergency weapon if you don't have anything else. I mean, if you take a round ash stick of 2.5 centimeters in diameter, this is a serious weapon. You can really crack a skull with it. And this is something which is already mentioned by some fencing masters in the 18th century, for example, Captain Sinclair, who says if you face a common cudgeler, common cudgeler in this context means a guy who is trained with a single stick and use it in these little tournaments and fights in ferries or on stage, for example, within the prize fights. So someone who knows how to use a single stick and who's really good in, cracking skulls open and, hitting bloody wounds on the head, because that was a sport. That was a sport of cudgeling, the old form of single stick fencing. And this is some evidence that this was quite a common sport. So you might face on the street and you get a quarrel, some argument with someone, and a fight might happen, and this guy has a stick. He would use it, or maybe you face someone at a fair who provokes you and you have to fight with him with a single stick. Then there are some tips within broadsword manuals, like for example Sinclair, that tell you how to guard your head, especially guard your head against such a guy. And the same would be true if you meet such a guy on the street and get into a fight with him, and he would aim for your head, because a blow with a cudgel to the head has the potential to knock you down, to knock you out, and at least give you a big headache, and maybe don't split your skull so you would die from one blow, but at least you will have a bad headache. And of course there will be blood, because the head bleeds a lot when you are hit. It's not, mostly these are not too dangerous wounds, but they look brutal. So if blood runs into your eyes, you cannot see quite well anymore, and so maybe the next hit with a cudgel will strike your kneecap or your chin and will knock you out, or break something, break your bones of the fingers and whatnot. So the cudgel was obviously a term for the training weapon, like a single stick, but also for a walking stick, or a specialized fighting stick. So when we look in the broadsword manuals we can find already some tips and some mentioning now that the swordsmanship system of the Highland Broadsword was used for the context of course, military, for the prize fights, also for duels, and also for self-defense. Not only with the Highland Broadsword, but also other bladed weapon of the period, and that this system could be adopted to a cudgel or walking stick, to use it in self-defense when you don't have your sword with you, or of course carrying swords in public was of course restricted by law in different ways during the time. It is said that in Scotland and also in Ireland, cudgels were used to train swordsmanship, and sometimes they used a long cudgel to represent the sword and a short cudgel to represent the dagger. This could mean not only a single stick in the meaning of having a stick with a hand protection to represent a sword, but also having a simple stick or a walking stick. And later we can see some development, for example in Ireland, where the training of soldiers in swordsmanship might have influenced in some way the faction fighting styles which were evolving, and the way of how the Irish were fighting with sticks, with their famous black thorn walking sticks and black thorn cudgels in the famous faction fights. So there is an interesting channel, by the way, from Francis McCaffrey, who makes shillelaghs and cudgels, Irish blackthorn walking sticks, and he has an interesting channel with where he shows his work, but also is talking about the history of Irish faction fighting. So I won't go into that topic more. I just put a link down below so you can check out Francis' channel, which is really great, really interesting, and should have your attention if you're interested in Irish history, and especially in Irish stick fighting. As it is mentioned in some of the manuals we use, the walking stick or cudgel could be a replacement in self-defense if you don't have a sword, but they also point out what you have to keep in mind, and the most obvious thing here is that you have an edged weapon which can cut and thrust, and on the other hand you have a quite round piece of wood. So you don't have any edge alignment, or you don't have any cutting or penetration power with a stick. On the other hand, you have a solid, big, robust basket-hilt to protect your hand, which you obviously don't have when you use a stick. So it's pointed out that, for example, if you're using a hanging guard, you should pull your hand a little bit back, because otherwise your hand is too exposed and you get a quick snapping cut or hit to the hand, and it might easily break your fingers, because finger bones are quite fragile. So this is the most important difference, that a stick is not a sword. However, if we take this cudgel I have, which is a walking stick with a root knob as a handle. This one is an older one. I don't know which wood it is. I got it in an auction. It's a little bit, from the handling and the feel, a little bit like an Irish shillelagh, blackthorn, something like that. But what I liked about it was that you have a solid handle to hold it, and quite a broad but not too heavy stick. Because when cudgeling, you can use the stick in two ways. You can use it holding it like a sword, or you can use it holding it like a club. But I will we'll put the camera up and we'll show you some of the techniques we use and some of the concepts we use. But what is clear for now is that the most brutal cutting power comes from a root knob. So of course you can do the whole system with a simple stick, with a plain straight stick, which has no root knob or no knobbed handle. But of course, such a root knob, or also a classical walking stick with kind of a pommel-like knob handle, is quite suited for this system we train. In the Broadsword Academy Germany, we base our cudgeling training, of course, on the movements of the Highland Broadsword, but we also include every kind of stick fighting tradition we can find, especially from Europe. So like La Canvini and Batizzo stuff. We look into Irish stick fighting styles, Italian stick fighting, just to compare and to learn more about it. But the basic fundamentals is the use of the Highland Broadsword, and then adopting it to this to a stick, or a walking stick, or a cudgel. As I said, the root knob has a lot of power, and you don't have to fill it with lead like they did it in the Irish faction fight sometimes. It still has potential to break bones and to knock people out. So this is the power part of the stick.